The Fourth War of the Diadochi was now descending upon the eastern Mediterranean. In the opening moves of the conflict, a defeated but still powerful and vengeful Antigonos sent his son Demetrios to Athens, who took the intellectual capital of Hellas with ease. Demetrios and his father are hailed as saviour gods by the Athenians, but they have many obstacles to overcome before they establish dominion over the Hellenistic world. Cassander remained ruler of Macedon, and Ptolemy was ready to defend his newly acquired territory of Cyprus against the two saviour gods of Athens. In the war to come, Hellas would see many battles and sieges, while Cyprus would become a battleground between empires for the millionth time. Who would emerge victorious was known only to the future, a future all of the successors wanted to seize. Welcome to our video on the start of the Fourth War of the Diadochi, the war in Greece, and the Battle of Salamis on the island of Cyprus. This week, our YouTube members and patrons will be watching the first video in our series on the Russian revolutions and the Civil War, as we cover the Revolution of 1905. The support of our YouTube members and patrons allows us to continue releasing these free videos without worrying about unstable YouTube ad revenue and lets us be much more choosy in terms of our sponsors. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and get access to 2 weekly exclusive videos, more than 150 right now, including the series on the Pacific War, Fall of Sparta, First and Second Punic War, Italian Reunification Wars, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, Reconquista, World War II North African Campaign, Persian Wars, and much more. Thanks for your kind support. Antigonos and Demetrios were keen to reassert their geopolitical dominance as well as their reputation after their defeat by Seleucus in the Babylonian War, and the renewed alliances amongst the other Diadochi that we covered in the previous episode were the perfect opportunity to achieve this. Thus, they preemptively invaded Greece, taking advantage of the ongoing anti-Macedonian discontent among the Greek polis. Antigonos was acting both for geopolitical reasons and out of a distinctly Macedonian way of conducting war and politics. In a Macedonian martial society that honors strength, militarism, and conquest, Antigonos could not afford to appear weak, and asserting control over Greece was the perfect means to achieve this while weakening Cassander. For their part, Ptolemy and Cassander also had hoped that their support of Seleucus would have the same effect Antigonos was now aiming for against them in Greece. If Seleucus had managed to weaken Antigonos, they could both do overtures and organize against him while he was weak. Thus, the invasion of Greece was both reactive against the other Diadochi and their own attempts to weaken Antigonos, and proactive in achieving a foothold in Hellas. It is also important to understand the state of the empire at the start of the Fourth War, because it determines how the major geopolitical players operate. We cannot know if any of these generals cared about Alexander's legacy until they found out all of his heirs were murdered, except for Cassander, who was perfectly happy murdering most of them. However, by this point it was obvious that the empire was not going to be reunified in Alexander's name, so someone like Antigonos could take his place. Lysimachos, Ptolemy, and Cassander seem to have preferred to have spheres of influence, and perhaps in the case of the first two, enlarging them as much as possible in Asia Minor and Syria respectively. Seleucus probably had ambitions similar to Antigonos as early as now, as he was claiming dream connections to Alexander. Using Alexander's myth would become a major theme in most Hellenistic dynasties, and this was the stage when the Hellenistic kings put themselves at the forefront of it, claiming divine descent and legitimacy from Alexander in order to legitimize their divine rights to rule. Thus, the motivations of each Diadochos, as well as the state of the heirs to Alexander's throne by the start of the Fourth War, meant that the empire was consigned to division and to the conflict that ensued. After his quick success in Athens, the young Demetrios now tried to champion himself as a liberator of Hellas. He used this propaganda strategy to gain favor with the various anti-Macedonian movements in southern Greece. This quickly bore him positive results in the city of Megara. There, the democratic faction sided with him, and this gave him the ability to take over the city and proclaim its freedom, as he had done in Athens. Demetrios also conducted a successful siege in Munichia, where the Democrats fought the 30 tyrants in the aftermath of our Peloponnesian Wars series. This siege was a testing ground for some of his most famous later achievements, but we know almost nothing about it. The consolidation in Attica was a stunning victory for the Antigonids, as they now had a foothold in Greece. Thereafter, the Athenians reconstructed their navy, which was now a loyal ally of the newly deified Antigonid general. Meanwhile, Antigonos's enemy Cassander scrambled with his troops to crush upstart Polis that began joining the enemy, for he now had to ensure Greece was under his control before striking back at Antigonos. Having achieved some success in Greece, the Antigonids were finally capable of dealing with the southern front and the scheming Ptolemy. The main target was to be the crossroads of 3 continents, the island of Cyprus, which was probably the most prized possession of the Egyptian-Greek kingdom. Demetrios set sail, while his allies began their fight against Cassander and passed through Rhodes, a well-known shipbuilding hub. He asked for their help, but the Rhodians refused, claiming they preferred their neutrality. Thus, Demetrios began his journey toward the island of Aphrodite with only the might of the Antigonid navy on his side. The importance of Cyprus cannot be overstated. It was a springboard into Asia Minor or Egypt due to its location, and was also a key location for naval raids elsewhere. The island's population had only recently had their city kingdoms abolished and been unified as a single province under the Ptolemaic Empire. The island was in the process of becoming a resource hub for timber and copper, and was very diverse, with Greek, Phoenician, Etio-Cypriot and other peoples living there. The power base of the Ptolemies on the island was the city of Salamis, near modern-day Famagusta. The governor of the island was Ptolemy's brother Menelaos. Thus, the Antigonids made plans to move from Syria and strike at the base of the island in Salamis. Already in possession of 30 Athenian triremes, Demetrios went to his father in Cilicia. There, his army was enhanced with 10,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry, and the navy was also enriched with the bottomless personnel of the Near East. It is estimated that at the dawn of the invasion of Cyprus, the Antigonid navy numbered around 180 warships, consisting of 53 heavy warships and around 110 light vessels. Demetrios took the ships and landed on the Carpassia on the northeast of the island. He proceeded to take over 2 local cities, Carpassia and Urania, leaving his ships at the tip of the peninsula. The Antigonids would have to contend with a large defense force. In his garrison at Salamis, Menelaos had 60 warships alongside 12,000 infantry and 800 cavalry. His strategy was to ensure Demetrios did not reach the city, so he moved out of Salamis and traversed 40 stadia to meet Demetrios in the open field. The tactics that ensued in the battle that followed are unknown to us, but it ultimately ended with the Antigonids triumphing over Menelaos' Ptolemaic host. 1,000 of Menelaos' men were killed and 3,000 were captured, while the remaining troops fled back to Salamis. Demetrios followed them and then put the city under siege. Moreover, the sea was blockaded by the Antigonid ships, trapping the defenders' warships. On land, Demetrios was determined to surpass Alexander's siege of Tyre by using his experience from Munichia. He put forward catapults and 2 battering rams and ordered a siege tower to be built. This siege tower, called the Helipolis, or Destroyer of Cities, was 9 stories high and took a month to be set up. After it was finished, the siege began. Despite the defense of the Salaminians, the walls were broken down as if struck by lightning. However, Salamis and Menelaos were not afraid of lightning, for their city was famous for the shrines to Zeus. That night they broke out of the walls and burnt down the siege engines, giving the city a brief respite. Demetrios had to regroup before going further. In the west of the island, in the city of Paphos, reinforcements arrived for the Ptolemaic defense force in the form of Ptolemy himself. Ptolemy brought with him 140 warships and 10,000 infantry. From there, he sailed on the southern coast, where Aphrodite once rose from the sea, before ending up in Kition. On the way, he received reinforcements from local allies. He sent a message to Menelaos that he should order the ships out of Salamis and sent them to him, as together there would be too many ships for the Antigonid forces to handle. The strategy Ptolemy expected is unclear, but Menelaos likely tried to exploit some gap in the blockade. However, Demetrios found out about this plan through unknown means and decided to go on the offensive before it could happen. He took his siege equipment, as well as all of his elite troops, and boarded them onto his ship. During the night, he placed them in front of Salamis' harbour, enhancing the blockade's strength. The night passed, and when none of Menelaus' ships emerged from the harbour, Ptolemy realized his plans had been compromised. Thus, he decided to attack Demetrios by himself. Ptolemy took his own armada and sailed out of Kition across Cape Pedalion to face Demetrios. The moment Demetrios saw the Ptolemaic fleet, he ordered 10 of his ships to move to the narrow opening of the harbour and continue the blockade, while he moved with the rest of his fleet to face the attack. The Antigonid heir put his largest and heaviest ships on his own left flank as a double line, with himself on the front of this line. However, realizing his lack of knowledge about naval affairs, he deferred command to a certain Medios of Larissa, an experienced navarch of the Antigonid navy. The center and right flank were put in a single line. Ptolemy responded with a mirror strategy, putting a double line on his own left wing and a single line on his center and right. Both enemies hoped to break their enemy's right first and surround the other ships. After a tense standoff, Demetrios and Medios dashed forward, with the Antigonid left clashing against the Ptolemaic right. Using the siege engines on the ship, the industrious Demetrios easily pounded the enemy and smashed through them. Ptolemy moved quickly as well, advancing his left flank and breaking through the Antigonid right. Meanwhile, the left flank of Demetrios' ships turned starboard and then proceeded to attack the center line of the enemy. The ships of Menelaus began to power through the ships that were conducting the blockade. Ptolemy turned around to rout the Antigonid center, but realized his own fleet had been routed already. Believing it would be too difficult to fight on, he retreated. By the time Menelaus had successfully broken through the blockade, his brother was already gone. The Battle for Salamis ended with a decisive Antigonid victory, with 40 warships and 100 supply ships from the Ptolemaic army captured by Demetrios. Menelaus fled from Salamis to Alexandria. Shortly after, the city duly surrendered to Demetrios. 16,000 infantry and 600 cavalry were captured, most of whom joined Demetrios. As for the Antigonid troops, they had minimal losses. Scholars debate the total numbers, but it is likely that only 20 ships were lost. Ptolemy and Menelaus, however, had lost something far more important than the battle. They had lost Cyprus. The island's cities surrendered to Demetrios one by one. Antigonid control over the island was secured for the foreseeable future, providing resources, halloumi, and geographical leeway for the Antigonid dynasty. With Cyprus now firmly in his hands, Antigonos now turned his sights onto Egypt, where he was keen to make gains against Ptolemy, the man who had stolen Alexander's corpse. After receiving his triumphant son, Antigonos broke with the usual rhetoric of protecting the unity of the empire, which by now everyone knew was a farce. Instead, he declared himself king and named Demetrios both co-king and heir. By doing this, Antigonos made a claim that Alexander's empire belonged to him, and that only he was fit to unify it. The ceremony was elaborate and caused a domino effect of royal declarations. The multitude then, for the first time, proclaimed Antigonos and Demetrius kings. Antigonus' friends tied at once a diadem round his head, while Demetrius was sent a diadem by his father and addressed as king in a letter he wrote. When the news was reported, Ptolemy's followers in Egypt also proclaimed Ptolemy king, to dispel any impression that his defeat had humbled his pride. And so emulation spread the practice like a contagion among the Diadochi. Lysimachus began to wear the diadem, and so too did Seleucus in his dealings with the Greeks. As with the barbarians, he had already been behaving as a king. Cassander, however, although the others wrote to him and addressed him as king, continued to write letters in the same style as before, with his name only but no title. The presence of the friends of Antigonos at his coronation was important. Macedonian and later Hellenistic kingship relied on the Phili Basileos, the friends of the king, as a trusted inner circle of administrators. This was the case for Alexander, and it would be the case for their descendants and heirs. It should be noted that Cassander did not also declare himself king, probably because his marriage to Thessaloniki, Alexander's sister, gave him enough legitimacy. Nevertheless, Antigonos' coronation marked a turning point that hastened the war, because now all main actors wanted to be kings of either their respective spheres of influence or the entire empire. The empire was now officially divided, and if it were to reunite, it would be under a new dynasty. Antigonos and Demetrios now had an incredible opportunity. Ptolemy was at a disadvantage, and that meant he was vulnerable. Thus, father and son began to march south for an invasion of Egypt. Antigonos levied 90,000 men on land at his capital, while Demetrios got his ships and set sail. The two sections of the military travelled down south from Asia Minor through the Levant towards Egypt. The border at Gaza was crossed, and Demetrios tried at once to march to the Nile Delta. However, the march was difficult due to the desert landscape, as well as the constant harassment by the old enemies of the Antigonids, the Nabateans, who remembered their previous confrontations in Petra. Eventually, they reached Pelusium, only to find Ptolemy across the river with troops ready to fight them off. Antigonos ordered Demetrios to conduct a landing and make them a bridgehead. Demetrios tried to do so with his best troops twice, once at Pseudonostum and once more at Vatniticum. Both times he was pushed back by Ptolemy. Antigonos considered his options. Attempting to cross the Nile via other means would mean risking failure like Perdiccas, possibly with equally fatal consequences. Thus, he ordered his troops to retreat and moved back to Antigonia. However, this was not to be the end of the war. Demetrios and Antigonos may have ruled Asia Minor and the Levant, but there was a small island that was both neutral and friendly with Ptolemy, the Rose of the Dodecanese, Rhodes. Antigonos ordered Demetrios to set sail and conquer the island. Demetrios, who remembered the Rhodians rebuking him, mustered his troops and did so, and it was a choice that would define his very name and bring forth his most infamous title. Throughout the Fourth War of the Diadochi, the Antigonids showed that they would not go down without a fight. With his victory at Salamis, Demetrios had shown that he could bounce back from his previous failures and secure areas for his father's control. In a world where empires rose and fell like ephemeral butterflies, Demetrios and Antigonos wanted theirs to last forever. Ptolemy, Cassander, Lysimachos and Seleucus also wanted to become immortalized in their dynasties. The struggle was bound to continue even after the Antigonid victory at Salamis. The Fourth War of the Diadochi will thus continue at sea, and many, many more battles will be fought to end it. The Eastern Mediterranean will tremble from the marches of horizon-spanning armies and endless naval armadas. To paraphrase the Italian politician Antonio Gramsci, the classical and Achaemenid worlds are dying, and the Hellenistic world struggles to be born. Now is the time of kings and generals. This series will soon continue. To make sure you don't miss it, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.